Right. Hey everyone, I'm Klloo. So, I had quite a lot of fun, right, looking at the supposed leak for High Seas and just speculating a little bit. So I thought, why don't we continue, right? So I've mocked up a few cards, and yeah, we'll just see where our mind takes us. Now, to start off, right, this is where my mind's at for High Seas. So obviously, pirates. We know it features pirates in some sense, either by class, right, a new class, or as a talent. So I'm thinking it's a class because where my mind goes with pirates for a talent is either warrior or ranger and wild. Yeah, I can see ranger in high seas. I can't get behind a double warrior set, right? So two in a row since we've just had draconic warrior and then pirate warrior, right? My mind also kind of goes to pirate mech, but since we're getting a max armory deck, I feel like that's also not the go, right? But who knows? So yeah, that's where I'm at with pirates. I'm more in line with thinking pirates is going to be a new class, right? And then of course we have ranger, right? I feel very confident that ranger will feature in high seas. We went over last time, right? How it's one of the lowest appearing classes so far, right? It's been the most infrequent since the last set. What was the last set that featured rangers? Was it just strictly outsiders, right? Yeah, that was the last full set featuring Ranger. So yeah, it's time for Rangers, and then we have the third slot, right? Because I think we're pretty confident that it's most likely three classes, right? Whether or not it's 6 heroes altogether, we're most likely just three classes to make drafting nice and simple and fun and allow for design to really shine. So Necromancer is probably top of the list there, but I got to throw Merchant and Bard into the ring, right? I'd love to see Merchant, and I'd very, very much love to see Bard, but I'd be more inclined to say Merchant over Bard. So yeah, so I'm at Pirates, Ranger, Necromancer, or maybe Merchant, and then Iffy, but I'd love to see it Bard, right? Does that make sense? Where are you at? Anyway, on to what I've mocked up. So, Pirates. Now, what are we thinking? Well, I'm drawing inspiration from Dual Threat because I like the idea of Dual Threat as a way to generate a playstyle that is somewhat different enough from Warrior or Assassin to make Pirate its own sort of thing. So I've mocked up two weapons. We have Flint and Steel Saber, and basically the whole idea is the playstyle of Pirate that I'm going for is weaving attack actions and weapon swings, right? So basically if you've attacked first and then swing a weapon, you get some sort of benefit. If you swung a weapon first, then you play a certain attack action, you get some alternative benefit. And, the class cards, therefore, would either be based off of the last attack style that you presented, right? So if you attacked previously with attack action card, it gets X benefit, right? Versus if you attacked with a weapon, it gets Y benefit, right? And then, of course, or just the straight conditional checks like Dual Threat, where it's if you've attacked with a weapon, gain this. If you've attacked with attack action this turn, gain this, right? Now, in terms of the cards I've mocked up, we've got Flint, which is a pistol, and a Steel Saber, which is, well, my attempt at a cutlass, right? See, can you figure out the cards I've just meshed together, right? Because I've used LSS's art, right? But yeah, so for Flint, we have whenever a weapon attack you control hits, if there are no counters on Flint, put a counter on it, right? And then action, pay one, move a counter from Flint and attack. So very mechanologist pistol-esque, but trying to tie it in to, again, off of weapon swing. So the whole idea here is you set up with your first weapon swing, you go into Flint. If your opponent doesn't block out Flint, then you have the counter for next turn. Otherwise, you need to, again, re-land a hit, right? And then the conditional, if you will, if you've attacked with another weapon this turn, this gets +1 until the end of turn, right? So that bumps it up to a 3 for 1, which, is obviously quite nice stats, right? And then Steel Saber, we have once per turn action, pay 1 to attack, right? Neither of them has go again, but the Steel Saber does have the conditional. If you've attacked with an attack action card, this gains go again until the end of turn. So the play line there is present an attack action card, swing with Steel Saber, right? Maybe do something else, and then end with Flint, right? I think that's fairly simple. And again, it opens up that idea of dual threat where you go attack, Steel Saber, play something to buff, and maybe that amps Flint, your pistol, to end the turn with, a sizable chunk of damage or something like that, right? So yeah, that's where my mind's at with Pirate. I really like the concept of dual threat. Again, just differentiating Pirate, well, what comes to mind for me when it comes to Pirate from Assassin or Warrior, right? So yeah, we need a third way to weave together attack action cards and weapon swings that are a little bit different, right? So after that, we have Ranger. So we saw Sea Monster Map and Abyssal Harpoon, right? These were the supposed leak cards. going over them, really scrutinizing them. They have the incorrect syntax use of token, which has been pointed out to me, so thank you for that. Right, so that's first big major red flag, and then of course they are severely overstated. Abyssal Harpoon, just as a generatable attack, should not be on curve, let alone have piercing 2 and go again, right? So a 0 for 4 is already insane, right? That's average stats. Throw piercing 2 and go again, and that's definitely way over the top. So yeah, Abyssal Harpoon as is. If it was a 0 for 3 with piercing 1, right, and go again, maybe I could see it, but it is just severely overstated. Same with Sea Monster Map, being a 0 cost, banish a card from the graveyard, which at this current point of Flesh and Blood is not a huge deal, right? It's not a huge loss or anything like that. So yeah, a 0 for a +2. So basically, with Abyssal Harpoon and this stat line, a 0 for 6 that has go again and piercing 2. That won't exist, right? Not without a whole bunch more of card interaction thrown into it. But in saying that, I do really like the idea of ephemeral arrows for Ranger to try and tie everything together in terms of taking a decent trap line, right? So basically you have traps, and my mind goes to, well, turn those traps into arrows. So I've changed Abyssal Harpoon to Reclaimed Harpoon, which still has ephemeral, but now it has, when this attacks, you may banish a trap from your graveyard if you do choose one. The stat line has been bumped down to a 0 for 1, right? And then depending on what you need, right, and the trap you banish, you can either get a +1, right, to bring it to a 0 for 2, or you can get go again if you've got, a buff card that's +3, for instance, a 0 for 4 with go again, banishing trap. I think that's good, right? Not great, but good. And then piercing 1. Again, if you try and get effect across, you can take piercing 1. You won't have the go again. Maybe you've got something else to generate go again. But I like the flexibility of it, and I like the idea of, again, banishing traps, right? Taking traps, and it would allow for some creative decisions, right? If we get more trap recyclage, well, taking traps out of the pool of your graveyard is kind of a benefit at this point, right? Because we have random putback traps, right? So if you're able to pick and choose which traps to get rid of from your graveyard, that can help you get the traps you want back into play. So yeah, I'd really like to see traps being traded for arrows, right? If we do get an ephemeral, again, it's in the works, whether or not it's for Ranger, right? We had the spiel about fodder cards for Art of War. Now, Riptide is the other thing to mention. I would expect Riptide if we're in Ranger for High Seas, and I would expect just classic or current Riptide, however you want to refer to it, with old art, just similar to Rhino of Heavy Hitters. He's too low on Living Legend points, right, to be altered, I think, or to get a reiteration. So it'd either be a completely new Ranger, right, or Riptide as is. I think Riptide as is fits overall. Yeah, we're good with that, right? So that's my thoughts on Ranger. Now, more speculative. So we'll do Necromancer first. Forgive me, I'm not a huge lore buff person, so, right, if I get stuff wrong, correct me, right, because I do like learning about it. But I've done Corva, right? Corva is the only Necromancer I could find mentioned in the Demonastery, right? So Corva, a washed and remains. Basically, her corpse has turned up. She's done something that has allowed her to reanimate herself, right? So the pun there, or the play on words being trying to be, washed up and washed as in cleansed and renewed, right? Anyway, onto the effects and playstyle. So we've got our reanimated ally by the way of Drowned Remains. So Drowned Remains, power and life is equal to the number of counters on it. So basically the concept here is you just get one static minion, right? So we have the whole wide board of spectral monsters, right? Well, spectral shields through Prism. And then we have big dragons by way of Dromai. So a third sort of playstyle for Illusionist or something similar to Illusionist. This is where my mind goes. So as Corva, we have once per turn instant, pay 2, banish a card from your graveyard. If you control a Drowned Remains, put a counter on it. Otherwise, create a Drowned Remains. I forgot to put starts with a counter on it because obviously it needs 1/1. It can't be a 0/0, right? So forgive me, there'll be typos. I've probably messed up some of the syntax as well. But yeah, so the idea here being that you create a static minion that can grow in strength, right? And then the class cards that you'll be playing are either adding counters to the Drowned Remains or consuming counters off of it to empower them in some sense, right? So yeah, I like the idea, right? Just a giant, big skeletal minion that you're growing. I know we sort of think hordes with Necromancer and everything like that, but again, it's sort of been played out in my mind with Illusionist, so I'd like some variants on it, right? But you know, who knows? Now, if Necromancer itself isn't a new class, then my mind always goes to Shadow Illusionist, right? That makes the most sense. So I do like the play on Blood Debt, right, with core visibility, right? Basically, if you're fueling your drowned remains by banishing cards, you're putting them in your banish zone with Blood Debt, and that will eventually bite you in the ass, right? So yeah, I think that's a decent concept, but let me know yours. What would you envision for Necromancer? Do you go the Horde route, right? Just summoning a whole bunch of minions, maybe not with Ward, right? Because that's Illusionist things, just a whole bunch of small minions. Again, it's kind of gets a bit difficult, because if you have a whole bunch of small minions, unless they're inefficient to use in a sense, right? Your opponent's ability to disrupt them and destroy them doesn't quite work. That's why they have to be Ward or they have to be Auras, and we get that sort of play on it, right? So my mind doesn't go to illusions or auras or you know, non-physical entities for Necromancer. So I do think a hard body skeletal remains, and that needs to be targetable by your opponent. So the only way to really do that is have it as one big thing, or I guess chuck Phantasm into it or Spectre. But again, those sort of keywords really don't fit in my mind for what I envision of Necromancer at the very least. Now, we get to the last two, Merchant and Bard. So we'll go back to Cash In for a moment. So Cash In, right? Cash In is currently not a problem, but as gold becomes more prevalent, the cost to draw 2 cards becomes lower and lower. We're banning Cash In before that time comes. Now, obviously, your mind goes to gold straight away, but does it have to be gold, right? I feel like silver's just as problematic. I can't actually see LSS going wild with generating gold, because gold will always have that break point of, if you get 3 gold on board, 2 blues and you're netting a card, right? And that's just too crazy to me. So rather than gold, what if we just go back to silver? Because silver is still a problem for cash in. If you can generate enough silver, you can still get a good value off of cash in. So yeah, what if we just do normal silver things, which seems a bit more in line with both Bard and Merchant. So starting off with Merchant, we have Kavdan, right? Again, going back to the lore, creatures in the tunnels of the pits, right? So it had a passage like he's trying to provide people with hope, right, and getting them out. So High Sea Smuggler, smuggling people, perhaps, or himself just getting out is where my mind goes. Now, I do like Kavdan, Trader of Skins ability. I do think it's a little bit weak nowadays, right? So obviously, trading 1 life with your opponent is quite nice. You can't carry with it, so it has that protection. But I don't like the 3 cost, right? So I have completely retooled Kavdan. So we have, whenever you play an item, you may destroy a silver you control if you do choose one, right? And your choices are either the item gets to go again, or you get to draw a card. So I think I'm quite happy with that design, right? Because it basically enables all items to be half decent, right? Because the ones already have go again, at least you're getting a card again if you have the silver built up, right? Or for an item that doesn't have go again but does have a strong effect, trading silver to have that effect active straight away would be really nice, right? What was the Command and Conquer-esque item, right? That would be fantastic to be able to give it go again, right? As long as the cost is equivalent. So yeah, easier time setting up items, but of course for a price of silver. The class cards would be centered around creating tokens for your opponents, but generating silver. It's basically trading with them, right? I'll give you a Vigor token, you give me silver in that sense, right? Something like that. And I like the idea of going back to cards like Coke's Commotion, right? Where it's incentivizing you letting the Kavdan, the Merchant player, hit you, right? Taking a little bit of damage, you get something out of it, right? Again, it's some sort of token, and they get, most likely, silver, copper, gold, whatever the currency of High Seas ends up being, right? So that's my vision for Merchant, or at least the beginnings of it, right? And then lastly, we have Bard. So Melody has become the plundering minstrel, right? And I guess fantasy-wise, it depends on your interpretation of Bard, right? Whether you go the spy route, like the normal fantasy trope, or just the joyous party member who is invigorating, encouraging everyone, right? But yeah, plundering minstrel. So I would highly expect, though, Melody and Bard's playstyle still revolve around songs, and her not to be retooled if she was to feature in High Seas, or if we were to ever get an adult version, because I think it's perfectly fine. It's more that the songs are an issue overall, right, for Melody, but nonetheless, Plundering Minstrel. The first time you hit an opposing hero each turn, create a silver token, and then once per turn instant, destroy a silver token that you control to gain 1 resource, right? Seems nice, right? Seems like a very aggro hero, right? So silver generation could also be changed to copper, so Final Act itself isn't just a basic turn timer, right? Once you get to, say, 10, 12 silver and you have that reach through deck, and Final Act just gets stacked up to be, what damage? It's twice? It's twice the pitch, right? So that'd be 22 damage? Yeah. So I would assume Bard sticks with copper. So that, again, you can't just go infinite in a sense, right? You can't just continuously cycle as much silver and blue pitchables as you have, right? Songs again are the big issue. So if Bard were to feature in High Seas or anything going forward, I would want songs to be completely reworked, right? They're definitely fun for UPF, and I understand what they were going for, but obviously if they were to be competitive, the disruptive effects would have to target other heroes, and the positive effects would have to target every hero, right? If all the songs that Melody has currently targeted you as well, I think they'd be good, right? I think they'd be significantly more enjoyable and slightly competitive, right? But because they don't, obviously it's a big handicap in a one-on-one match, right? Where you're not forming alliances, pumping someone up to take someone else out, right? So yeah, I'd like new songs that are a lot more competitive by way of who they target and who they generate X for. And then a general, class style card would probably be some sort of tipping effect where basically your opponent can choose to give you a silver/copper token and it will, in some sense lessen the effect, right? So this, whatever it has, say it's a 0 for 4, for instance, right? Your opponent can choose to give you a silver and it becomes a 0 for 3, something like that. Or it loses go again, right? And, I like the idea that, again, you're building up to the final act and this big payoff, so you're giving your opponent a lot of leeway and choice over what you're doing, right? I feel like that would be the adequate balancing points for Melody, and also, create a class that does feel a bit more unique, right? Instead of just a normal aggro hero, as the hero ability probably, voices, right? But yeah, there we go. There's my my speculatory hopes, in a sense, for High Seas, right? Again, Pirates in some extent. Ranger feels like almost guarantee, right? It's just what that third class is, right? Whether it's, again, I would say Pirate Warrior, Pirate Ranger, Necromancer, right? If we get another talent set. Otherwise, Pirate Ranger X. Yeah. Anyway, there you know. What are your thoughts going into High Seas? Anyway, hope you enjoyed. Yeah.